This week, today, Fridays, 6 to 7 p.m.
Good evening. It is a Friday and it's 6 p.m. So you know what that means? It's time for This Week Today. My name is Oliver Dickson and it's an honor and a pleasure to be in your company once again this week as we dig into the deep dive into the biggest issues of the week and make sense of its influence and impact on our body politic. Of course, the show is live streamed, so you can watch us on YouTube, and I'm taking your engagements on our line, which is 011 714 2006, 011 714 2006. So give us a call, or you can alternatively send us a voice note on 0614 104 107. I'm also on Twitter, so tweet me directly. It is at Oliver_speaking, or simply hashtag SAfm This Week Today, or you can simply just tweet us at SAfm Radio across all social media platforms. On Facebook, I am Oliver Dickson. Let me tell you what's coming up on today's show. We're going to be speaking a little later on to Quinan Musaubi, who's a political journalist out at the Daily Maverick. And we're going to take a deep dive into the outcome of the most recent ANC-NEC meeting that took place much earlier this week. A lot of important resolutions were made in that NEC meeting that will have a great impact on what happens in the ANC in relation to the state capture report, specifically when it comes to the part where the ANC has been found wanting, so to speak, relating to cadre deployment. We'll also be speaking briefly about what was said there about Eskom. It seems to be that the ANC has run out of ideas on how to fix Eskom in particular. And some of these ideas relate to who really is politically in charge of Eskom. Is it Gwede Mantashe as Minister of Energy, or is it Pravin Gordhan as Minister of Public Enterprises? Where does Eskom source its mandate from, so to speak, and where does it take its most important direction from? Who then is in front line when it comes to rescuing our state-owned enterprise, in particular in this instance relating to Eskom? That's a conversation we're going to be having a little bit later on. Then we're going to be speaking to Chat Williams, and this is, of course, about Boris Johnson having stepped down this week. Well, having been forced to step down this week as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. What does that mean for the body politic of the UK? Importantly, and this is more interesting for me, is this an opportunity for the Labour Party to usurp an opportunity here, given that there's a leadership vacuum within the Conservative Party? In fact, for the most part, there's been a lacuna in the credibility matrix of the United Kingdom's body politic, in part because Boris Johnson messed up a lot of things. People in the UK today are facing some of the worst runaway inflation in Europe as a result of Boris Johnson not having been proactive enough when it was being brought to him that the war of Ukraine, that the Russian invasion of Ukraine will be a political calamity for the United Kingdom, the world at large. And he also didn't do too well on COVID. But it seems that the Conservatives gave him a lot of chances, and they've run out of goodwill for him. We'll speak about where that political goodwill will shift towards. But we start the show with Editor-in-Chief at the Business Day, Hilary Joffe, who wrote a column this week, shedding light, at least, giving perspective to what she calls the turf war of who runs Eskom, between Eskom's leadership management on the one end, and I guess you can also place there the political leadership of Eskom, and the workers, in particular here, the union bosses. Really, who calls the shots at Eskom, and where does the real power of the direction of Eskom source their credibility and their mandate from? How much sway do the workers have, and is that too much power for the workers of Eskom to have? That's a conversation we'll be having in a very, very short while. Of course, the show is being live streamed on YouTube. So just go to SAfm YouTube channel, or you can just watch us on Facebook. We're streaming live there too. On Twitter, we're streaming live there too, and you can see my face as we present the show. You can see Hilary Joffe's face, who will be joining me in a short while as we present the show. And you can just give us a call, 011 714 2006, WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Oliver Dickson on SAfm.
And joining us now to have this conversation about Eskom and really what she calls the turf war at Eskom is Editor-in-Chief of the Business Day, Hilary Joffe. Hilary, thank you so much for your time this evening. Once again, it's great to have a chat with you about this. As you've put it in your column, the illegal, and I don't quite like using the word illegal here because it implies that protest is undemocratic, but the unprotected protest, labor action by Eskom employees really, as you say, tipped it into stage 6 and rolling stage 6 blackouts for the longest time that we've had stage 6 blackout in the history of load shedding, right? And you then point to what the crisis here is, that the union bosses are speaking about more than just labor issues. They're speaking to policy issues, specifically pertaining to PPEs and specifically pertaining to the unbundling of Eskom. You say they don't quite like that. Let's start there. Why is it that the leadership of NUM and NUMSA do not like the unbundling of Eskom on the one hand, and on the other, they do not like the fact that Eskom is bringing on private power producers?
I think there are probably two sides to that, Oliver, and good evening and thank you for having me on your show. First of all, they represent workers. That's their mandate. They're accountable only to the members who are the workers, and their job, as they see it, I suppose, is to protect the wages and the jobs of their members.
Yeah.
And there is a sense in which the very important energy transition that South Africa is wanting to go through as it shifts from coal-fired power to more renewable energy does put jobs at risk, in the sense that coal-fired power stations and coal mines employ a lot of people. Wind farms employ just about nobody, and solar farms the same. So I think there is an issue with jobs. I mean, we talk in this country about a just transition rather than just an energy transition.
Can I pause you there, Hillary?
We would look to the health of communities.
Yeah, can I pause you there? Can I pause you there to ask this question? And I really appreciate that you're highlighting that solar and wind do not nearly employ as many people as coal does, right? And that's an important point to make, because independent power producers and the entire political program around it have touted that this will be creating new jobs. Are you saying that they're lying about it? Hillary? Hillary, do we have you there?
My apologies, I was on mute. They will, you do? You got me. They will be creating new jobs, no doubt about it. And for the growth of our economy, we really, really need to do it. But the new jobs that they create will not be the same jobs that are lost. However, it has to be said that our power stations, as we've heard so many times these last few weeks, our coal-fired power stations are very old, very dirty, and very creaky. And they have to be decommissioned, a lot of them, in the next decade or so anyway. So yeah. I don't think that I would say that NUM and NUMSA have taken aim so much against the energy transition itself. It's more what did Kasatu call it? The fantasy of privatization. They have been pretty opposed to what they see as privatization. They are not big friends of the unbundling of Eskom, which I think would be not a privatization, but would be a condition for introducing more privately owned independent power producers into the system. And there's certainly been tension before about the introduction of IPPs into the system. And I think as we are very much hopefully gearing up to get far more IPPs into the system, because Eskom certainly can't generate the power that South Africa needs. I think there's an ideological issue and there's a threat.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure.
Can I speak to that ideological issue quickly?
Talks are going on.
Just to speak to that ideological issue very quickly. Is this an unreasonable contention between the unions on the one hand being opposed to privatization and the political leadership on the other hand surreptitiously being pro-privatization? I'm asking this because it is not obvious that privatization and the introduction of renewables, it will be a panacea to our energy crisis. The wind is not always blowing, the sun is not always shining. Coal will for a long time be a part of our energy mix, as the ANC calls it, right? But more importantly as well is that it may, as many say, would not be as affordable as we think it to be. Many are arguing that NERSA just won't have the metal to be able to force price regulation on power on independent power producers, and we may face runaway energy cost and electricity cost that falls onto the consumer and businesses in this country. Is it an unreasonable debate to have at this stage, given that it's primarily an ideological one and not one about pragmatism where there is an obvious outcome?
Well, let's be pragmatic about it, Oliver. I mean, Eskom doesn't have the money to run its existing fleet, and it's making a very poor job of it, to be perfectly honest. I mean, the energy availability, which is the performance of the existing power stations, has just fallen and fallen, and the more maintenance they do, the worse it seems to get. Now, we can talk, and I did in my column, about why that is the case, and what sort of could be done to help them. But the point is that Eskom has not covered itself in glory, and in any event, it does not have any money. It is deeply in debt. At the same time, the private sector, both in South Africa and globally, is extremely keen to invest in infrastructure of all sorts, but in power infrastructure in particular. And we're not only talking about wind and solar here. I mean, in South Africa's energy plan, whether you agree with it or not, there's gas, there's even a little bit of cleaner coal, there's wind and solar, and there's also storage, because the issues that you talk about with wind and solar being not as base load, if you like, as coal is, need to be addressed over the long term by storage. So we have an energy plan. That is the energy plan that the country is committed to. It both is designed to ensure that we have the generation capacity to power the economy and keep us alive in the next many decades, and also to ensure that we go greener. And that, again, I mean, we know what climate change is about. We're in the unfortunate position that we are very, very fossil fuel dependent, one of the most dependent economies in the world when it comes to fossil fuels. The world is sort of turning against that. We will, if we do not make that transition at a reasonable pace, we will find, borders closed to our exports. And we will find that we struggle to get funding from international funders. So I think it's not really a debate whether we have to embark on that transition. And I think it's not really that much of a debate in pragmatic terms, that it is the funding for this is going to have to come from the private sector. Now, I don't actually see that as being privatization in and of itself. I think what we're talking about is not selling off Eskom. We're talking about the new generation capacity that needs to come into the system, needs to be funded outside of the state. Because really, I mean, if the state is going to be putting money into stuff, I'd far rather see it putting money into social grants and basic education and public infrastructure of the kind that you can't fund with private money, sewage systems, reaching rural communities. Why must we put it into electricity infrastructure, which the private sector and international funders would be more than willing to fund? And the same, I think, goes for other areas of infrastructure. And so I think that is the way forward. If you want to call it privatization, as the unions do, you can, but you could call it private sector participation, partnerships, whatever you want to call it. But that is clearly the pragmatic way forward that we have to go as a country. And just on the subject of the cost of renewable energy, I agree with you that we haven't factored in the whole cost, and the whole cost does include a big expansion of Eskom's transmission grid to support that. But there is absolutely no question that the cost of those sources of power is coming down very, very, very rapidly.
I want to take the conversation here with the few minutes we have left. You speak in your column about the fact that for a long time, the employees, and here I'm talking about union bosses represented at Eskom, typically have been influencing whether or the policy direction of Eskom, or have been trying to do so. And you don't use this word, but effectively holding Eskom at ransom. And this is not this is not the first instance this happened. It's happened multiple times before, and you enumerate some of those instances in your column. But I want to ask this: you've covered Eskom for the last 15 to 20 years as a journalist. In the last 2 decades of Eskom's relationship with the unions, it seems to be that it was mostly amicable. Where did the switch come in? And it seems to be that the distance comes as a direct result of the political shift. Where did it come from?
I don't think it's been that amicable. There have been strikes before. And I think what I pointed to in my column is not so much where there's been conflict. What I was trying to highlight is the fact that government intervenes in quite an unhelpful way in these things.
Right.
I think that was really the point I was trying to highlight, is that when we talk about, in the middle of this past crisis, Pravin Gordhan swoops in to solve the crisis. President Cyril Ramaphosa swoops in. And I was raising the question about how helpful is their intervention actually in the negotiation process between Eskom and its own workforce. And we've had a series of events in the past where Eskom was trying to find a different relationship with its unions and deal as any employer would with a strike. And the political leadership has kind of swooped in and said, no, you've got to settle. And that just sort of perpetuates the problem. What I did suggest in my column is that Eskom does need political support, but not interfering in its labor matters, but rather it needs first of all, it needs law enforcement to the extent that the strike is violent. That must be acted against very swiftly, and we've seen our government really fail to ensure that kind of law enforcement swift response. And the other thing is it needs that quite a loosening up of the regulations which have prevented or certainly made it difficult for Eskom to do maintenance in the most efficient way, to hire people in the most efficient way. You saw a recommendation from the National Planning Committee that we declare a state of emergency, and one of the reasons was so we could sort of circumvent the red tape that's holding back the energy industry, both the IP introduction of new power producers, but also Eskom itself. And it seems to me completely ridiculous that you need a state of emergency just for government to make sure that it creates the kind of environment in which Eskom could just do a better job for us.
Yeah. And just lastly, and I guess this is the crux of the conversation, are union bosses holding Eskom executive at ransom? And will they continue? Do you see them continuing to do so in the next couple of years?
I do think that to the extent that there are tensions within the company about the changes that it really rather desperately needs to make, the restructuring, the getting rid of corruption, some of which involves Eskom's own employees, the getting rid of all the vested interests who are raising the costs and making it inefficient. And Eskom needs to restructure and it needs to transform. And to the extent that the unions, which you'll know that the unions negotiate for about 70% more or less of the Eskom workforce. And as with much of the rest of the public sector, it's a very unionized kind of shop. I think that we do, what is needed, and this is where Pravin Gordhan and his colleagues would be very helpful, is to try and, to the extent that this is causing conflict, and we believe, because Eskom has told us and law enforcers have told us, that there's sabotage going on, and that is workers, whether deliberately or, just by negligence, actually making sure that the plants don't work. Now, if that is the form that industrial action is taking, and I'm not saying the unions have given their blessing to that, but if that is the way workers are behaving, Eskom's own employees sabotaging plants, then there's clearly a level of conflict there which really needs to be addressed. And we need some sort of a social accord, if you like, to be brought about, which will bring the workers and their union bosses on board to the kind of changes that are needed at Eskom, which are pretty profound changes, really.
Yeah. Hilary Joffe, thank you so much for your time this evening. Really, really do appreciate it. Invaluable insights. That's Hilary Joffe, the editor-in-chief at The Business Day. Hilary is valuable in this because she's covered Eskom for an incredibly long time. I know very few journalists who've covered Eskom for longer than she has. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. On the other side of this, we're going to be speaking about the outcomes of the ANC NEC meeting and what that means, in part for Eskom, but more holistically, what it means for the ongoing tensions between the ruling party and the Zondo Commission report that really does not speak about the ANC in great light. Don't go away.
SAfm has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za. At SAfm Radio and at Oliver_speaking on Twitter.
It is 26 minutes after 6 p.m. and it's a Friday, so you are listening to This Week Today. My name is Oliver Dickson. Now, the ANC had an NEC meeting, what I would say one of its most important NEC meetings in the last couple of quarters of the ANC NEC. And this, NEC meeting focused very strongly on some of the tensions, political tensions that are existing at Eskom. It seems to me that Pravin Gordhan and Gwede Mantashe are not seeing eye to eye on the political direction and what ought to be the political intervention at Eskom. But they also focused on the Zondo Commission and the report there, saying that all party members implicated by the Zondo Commission report should appear before the Integrity Commission. The Integrity Commission of the ANC will be very busy if that's the case. Or is that the case? Quinen Musaubi, who's a political journalist with the Daily Maverick, now joins us. Quinen, I want to start here. Just how many ANC members have been implicated by the Zondo Commission?
Good evening, Oliver. Thanks for having me. Can I just correct you? My name is Quinen Maswabi.
My apologies. Quinen Maswabi, who's a political journalist with the Daily Maverick. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of the individuals implicated in the Zondo Commission, we have a lot of high-profile names. We know that we saw Malusi Gigaba, who was a former finance minister and home affairs minister, who appeared before the Zondo Commission to answer for his involvement in state capture and his links with the Gupta family. We know that former Minister of Water and Sanitation, Nomvula Mokonyana, was also a part of this. We know that, former Minister Musebenzi Zwane was also in the mix in all of this. So we have a couple of people, very high-profile individuals from the ANC, including the president himself, who was the deputy president at the time, as well as the former president of the country and the ANC, President Jacob Zuma. So we do have quite a lot of people, who were fingered in wrongdoing or in processes which were flawed in order for state capture to ensue in South Africa, and a lot of very high-profile individuals, as I've said. So it's, as you said, it's going to be a very hard time and a very busy time for the Integrity Committee.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read all of the Zondo Commission report. It's going to take a very long time for me to read all of it. So, but what I do notice, and perhaps this is also where us as the media need to get the language right, is what is meant by an implication. Some people's, were just blatantly called incompetent in not so many words by the Zondo Commission report. But in some instances, the report refers the NPA to prosecute certain people or to consider prosecuting certain people. Who exactly? Because that's where the real implication as far as integrity for the ANC comes into play, right? Because it speaks to criminal behavior very explicitly. Who is the NPA to prosecute who are high profile or really just ANC members? Specifically ANC deployees, perhaps.
So I think the main issue was that most of Zondo's recommendations, especially when it comes to the ANC, did not necessarily highlight anybody to be prosecuted per se, but it did kind of point out to say that this was wrongdoing. For instance, with Mosebenzi Zwane, he was said to, be implicated in Freda dairy farm issue, as well as in the housing issue. And with his case, they are saying more of pay back the money, give us back the money that was spent wrongfully on whatever wrongdoing. And this is the same sentiment with the suspended Secretary General of the ANC, Makashule, where he is being identified as someone who has done wrong in the Free State. However, there's no clear kind of path as to what they can be charged for. It's more of kind of a corrective recommendation on the ANC's part.
So what has Jeff Radebe been tasked to do with this, I guess, new structure that has been put in place to make sure that the party deals with the outcomes of the Zondo Commission report?
So the ANC bigwig Jeff Radebe basically in the NEC meeting did a presentation, and part of the presentation was to find ways in which the ANC would be dealing with these individuals who have been, found to have been implicated in state capture. And one of the main recommendations from this presentation was that there should be a total overhaul of many of the ANC's key policies. And then one interesting thing was that they suggested that ANC members who are implicated come forward to the Integrity Committee and basically have the Integrity Committee deal with the issue. But we are in a situation where the Integrity Committee doesn't really have a good reputation. So we do not know whether this is a real consequence to being involved in state capture, but that was what Jeff Radebe was tasked to do, and that's the kind of presentation he gave to the other NEC members this past weekend.
One of the policies in question here is the ANC's policy on cadre deployment. What's the party's movement around that?
So you might know that the DA has already launched a court application to get the courts to basically declare cadre deployment as unconstitutional. And the ANC did confirm that they would be responding to that. But in the meeting itself, the sentiment was that this is a standard practice which is, carried out all over the world. The DA itself is a part of the political parties that carries out cadre deployment in their own way. They just don't call it cadre deployment. And that instead of, completely scraping this mechanism that the ANC is used to utilizing when it comes to appointing officials, they need to make sure that they appoint the right people in these positions, people who are qualified, people who have the requisite skills to actually occupy these positions, and to also look at ways in which to, strengthen how they come about these appointments. I know that it said that the president did mention the issue about the minutes from the cadre deployment meetings, and particularly the fact that the minutes couldn't tell any kind of story or idea as to how they came to the appointments that they've made in the last
Well, he claimed that there were no minutes at all.
One of the mechanisms they are trying to... They do have minutes, but the sentiment was that the minutes were not detailed. They were not good enough to, hand over. And even when they did hand them over, there was not much detail as to how they got to the decisions they made. So definitely there was a conversation about how they can strengthen this kind of mechanism and make sure that, there's a clear system that plays out in the ANC when people are appointed.
Yeah. Phala Phala was an issue that, from a factional point of view, came up in the meeting, wasn't a big part of the meeting, because the response and the retort was the one that we have been getting, right? That let law enforcement agencies do their work, and we'll respond after that. How much of the Phala Phala conversation defined the political mood?
I think the Phala Phala conversation has really just, turned everything upside down, especially in a conference year, because now we're looking at a situation where this person, who is seen as the preferred candidate, President Cyril Ramaphosa, who's been endorsed for the second term, is now put in a position and a situation where he needs to answer for any illegalities he might have been involved in the Phala Phala saga. And of course, there's a lot of pushback from those who are deemed to be in the RET faction of the ANC. They are quite disgruntled and they want action to be taken immediately. In fact, in the last NWC meeting, from what I know, it was the likes of Tony Yengeni who were pushing for the president to step aside immediately and not to even allow law enforcement to, do their work before making a final decision on the issue. So from this point on, obviously there'll be a lot of pushback from RET faction trying to make sure that this matter is dealt with and possibly seeing the president resigning or stepping aside before the conference so that they can have some glimmer of hope of, leading or having their preferred candidate leading. So there's going to be a lot of push and pull from those who are in support of the president and those who are against him regarding this issue. And I think that it's something that we need to watch very closely moving forward.
The president said that he's reached out to the Integrity Commission proactively and saying to them that he wants to appear before them. But there doesn't seem to be a date on when that's going to be happening. Is there a reason for that?
So that was the particular conversation that happened in the NEC meeting last weekend, where the question was, when is this Integrity Committee hearing going to happen? And the president asked for more time to, I don't know, do what exactly. At this point, I don't know why, but they didn't set a definite date yet. As journalists, obviously, we have inquired about that besides hearing, from our sources in the meeting. And the ANC doesn't seem to have a solid date, but they did say they would mention it once they do know exactly when it's going to happen.
So there's no explanation as to why the president wants more time, except for us to assume that he's just prevaricating this issue and kicking for touch.
I think at this moment, there's no clear indication. If I were to give you a reason now, it wouldn't be clear, or I don't know at the moment. But I think that as the story and as the situation plays out, we might start getting an idea of why exactly he asked for the extension.
Yeah. Let's speak about ESCOM, because that too was an issue in the NEC meeting. Strong political intervention needs to happen was the effective outcome of it. But what was the nature of the conversation?
So the conversation was more about the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan. He had a presentation and he had to basically explain to the NEC exactly what the weaknesses and shortcomings of ESCOM were and the reasons why South Africans are on stage 6 of load shedding at the moment in the middle of winter. And basically also come up with solutions as to how this can be solved moving forward. And quickly so, because the sentiment definitely from the president was that, this is not good for the ANC and this needs to be solved as soon as possible, because it's not only affecting ordinary citizens, but our economy, businesses, people are upset in general with the ANC because they see the ANC as the supposed leader in society and they're supposed to be dealing with such issues. So Minister Gordhan went into the meeting, I think it was the Monday, where he did the presentation, and he basically said one of the biggest weaknesses for ESCOM at the moment was the skills deficit. And unfortunately, ESCOM finds itself in a place where there are a lot of inexperienced technicians or people working on technical jobs who cannot solve the problems that we are facing right now as a country. And that's just simply because a lot of people apparently left South Africa, skilled technicians, people who have years of experience left South Africa at some point. And this has had a very negative effect on the country. So what the minister was saying was that they were trying to even speak to former SAfm CEOs to see if they weren't able to, convince some of the more skilled and experienced technicians to come back to the country and assist us with our current problems. And then this was also the same sentiment from, the president saying that we need to even try people who went abroad and left the country so that they can come back and assist us. And also speaking about renewable energy, the sentiment was that it was a good option, or it is right now a good option, but it's not sufficient to keep our lights on, or the entire country's lights on. So it can happen as, something on the side, but it can't be our sole focus at the moment, because the president felt like there should be a definite change and it should be happening quickly. So with renewable energy, from what I can tell you, it could assist only 45% of the country, or 45% of power generation at the moment, and that's not enough. That's far from enough, of course. So they are looking at other options. They did also mention the issue about municipalities taking up the job of providing electricity for their own areas. But at the moment, from what I know, only 2 municipalities have actually applied for this.
Yeah.
And that's Stellenbosch and City of Cape Town.
Yeah.
So that's been an ongoing conversation about how do we generate energy, and who do we involve in this, IPPs. So, they were looking at a broader kind of spectrum of how we can solve the load shedding issue.
Yeah. And did they at all speak about the contentious regional elective conferences and provincial elective conferences that have taken place? Or Ekurhuleni, for instance, the outcome there is being contested, and possibly the outcome in the Gauteng provincial elective conference might be contested. Was there at all a conversation about what the party's response should be to discontent where there were contentious elective conference outcomes?
So in this NEC, I think they were looking at more national issues and issues that the ANC government can solve. But in the last NEC meeting, just before the Gauteng provincial conference, there was a lot of conversation around, especially Ekurhuleni. What I can say is that there were a lot of disgruntled NEC members who felt as if there was no need to discuss a region like Ekurhuleni. It was unnecessary to have an entire NEC meeting
about
just
a region
to discuss Ekurhuleni when there were other regions in the country. Yeah, so there were other regions in the country, in Limpopo, in other provinces that also had similar issues, that had problems with branches, but this was never ever brought up in this kind of, level and on this kind of stage. So a lot of people were confused as to why do we have to talk about Ekurhuleni at this point when, regions need to sort out their issues. And it seems like there was kind of an unhappiness from some members who said that this was for some people's own selfish needs, and that this issue should have never gone to the NEC, because it should be dealt with by the provincial leadership. It was never supposed to be part of any NEC meeting, because there's no way that the NEC can decide on regional matters. And so if they definitely that conversation happened, but that was 2 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah. Have they decided on the political program for the rest of the year? That is to say, what they will be doing about the NGC in relation to the policy conference leading up to the elective conference?
So for now, what we do know is that they're trying to push ahead with the policy conference because they feel like there are a lot of issues that they need to tie up. And that's the platform that the ANC usually uses to, speak about these issues, especially around policy. So the policy conference is supposed to happen by the end of this month, Oliver.
Yeah.
That's what has been decided. And then in terms of, with the provincial conferences, unfortunately, they were supposed to conclude all provincial conferences by at least by the time the policy conference takes place. But it's been unfortunate because provinces like the Free State, Northwest, the Western Cape are nowhere near to going to conference. So they'll have to go to policy conference without going to their provincial conference. And for now, we do know that KZN will be going to their conference in the next 2 weeks. As well. Then after that, it will be policy conference. So at the moment, that's where they stand in terms of their timeline for conferences and the policy conference.
Queen and Maswabi, thank you so much for your time this evening. Really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
That is Queen and Maswabi, who is a journalist and columnist with the Daily Maverick. On the other side of this, we speak about Boris Johnson's resignation as Labour Party leader and soon to be no longer the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. That's a politically contentious issue. We'll speak about that shortly.
Oliver Dickson on SAfm. This week, today, Fridays, 6 to 7 p.m. SAfm has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za. At SAfm Radio and at Oliver_speaking on Twitter.
This is This Week Today. My name is Oliver Dickson, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be in your company once again this evening as we take a deep dive into some of the most contentious and important issues of the week that shape our body politic in ways that impacts yours and I's life every single day. Wow, that was terrible English. My life and your life every single day. We're taking your calls on any other conversations we've had thus far. The number is 011-714-2006, and you can also send us a WhatsApp voice note on 0614-104-107. What are some of your reflections of the conversation I had with Hillary, as well as the conversation I had a very short while ago with Queenan about the ANC's NEC meeting? We slowed it down a little bit and really got into some of the details that we may have glossed over throughout the week because a lot happened this week. A lot happened this week, and some of those details matter as we may have missed it as our body politic became very saturated in the news media cycle. But right now, I'm in conversation, and again, by the way, I'm taking those calls, 011-714-2006, and the voice notes is 0614-104-107. Right now, I'm in conversation with Chad Williams, who is a multimedia journalist with The Independent, and we're going to be speaking about Boris Johnson's resignation. What wasn't clear for a lot of people outside of the Great Britain is why the Conservatives wanted Boris Johnson to resign and step down. Chad, let's start there. Why did the Conservatives want him to go?
Hi, good evening, Oliver, and good evening to all your listeners. First of all, I'm with IOL News, not The Independent. Look, Boris Johnson has, been a contentious figure in the UK since he took office. And I think it's actually, we should actually start by saying that he's, been facing a lot of fighting within his party.
Yeah.
And we've seen, this week alone with the announcement of the resignation, he is fighting an internal battle with many forces on the inside actually saying, you know what, he hasn't done a lot for Britain in his tenure. To take it back to Africa, and before we jump into the piece that I wrote, I must first say that Boris Johnson's relationship with Africa, first of all, because that obviously is our point here, hasn't been easy. He's had a shaky relationship with Africa. But I think the more we look at his tenure in office, he has been fighting, internal leadership. There's been leadership battles within the Conservative Party that I feel haven't been, been put out there. I think the Conservative Party is quite good at keeping, their business or their dirty laundry on the inside, not to allay any fears outside. But Boris Johnson is, he's been fighting battles ever since he took office.
Let's enumerate some of those battles and speak about them each in detail. We'll end off with the Rwanda issue because that is, I guess, crystallizes his tenuous relationship with Africa. But to start off, the Conservatives were worried about runaway inflation and that there's no ideas in terms of how Downing Street plans to deal with runaway inflation. Boris Johnson's lackluster response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, they seem to think is a contributing factor to this. How do they place the blame for that squarely on the shoulders of Boris Johnson when they themselves have not had a good history with wars and invasions for a long time?
Yeah. Look, I think what we can say, he's been defying calls to resign. It's not the first time. This week, obviously, he's just felt the heat. But there have been growing calls with regards to inflation, and a lot of people in the UK are saying they are poor. I've spoken to a few people out there, and what we are not seeing, I think, in mainstream media is actually the state of Britain. Britain is in turmoil, and we try to focus and we look at rising food costs. They are feeling the pinch just as much as we are feeling it out here with fuel and food and the prices of maize and basic foodstuffs. So I think there's just a sense of people thought that Boris coming in would actually be making a difference, but he hasn't really made a huge difference. He was in office for just over 1,000 days, which is, I looked at the record of previous prime ministers, and they've all hovered around just over 1,000 days, including, Margaret Thatcher and so forth. So he's been fighting, an internal battle. Just looking at he telling MPs that he would not. He actually doesn't want to walk away. He feels that he's still got a lot to do, and they want to see, they want change. And I think the people of Britain are at a point where they are not happy with his leadership style. He is really, he's had his fair share of scandals in the last few years at least, even going back to 2002 on his comments on colonialism and Africa. But he has, he's constantly been in the spotlight and not for the right things. Oliver, can you hear me?
I'm asking, has his personal scandals mattered to him in any way, mattered to the Conservatives in any way, specifically given that, Great Britain, while they think they are the bastions of liberalism, are actually quite a conservative country. And Boris Johnson is a unrelenting philanderer, being the prime minister. Did it matter to the Conservatives in any, was there any shred of worry from them?
Look, I think, like you said now, the blame shouldn't squarely be sitting actually on Boris. I think Boris is basically just a fall guy. The issue lies within the Conservative Party. As we know, we've seen over the years, they have, been, in the media and in the spotlight for being pretty, choose my words really carefully here, but they have been in the spotlight for being pretty, whoever is there, they've put their trust in Boris. And I think they thought that Boris would actually take the country forward. But in essence, my opinion, he's actually taken the country a few years back. I mean, I know you said we're going to go back to Rwanda again, but I think it squarely lies with just his management style. He is actually, he is working on trying to bring change within the Conservative Party, but the internal battle and the fight that he's fighting on the inside of his party, I think that is what that was essentially his downfall.
It isn't clear who's going to be his successor. The Conservatives are meeting to try and figure out who the next leader should be. Is the Labour Party coalescing to perhaps try and use this moment to reinvent themselves politically?
Definitely. I would say, we're living in a time where anything is possible. And I think this is an opportune time for the Labour Party to actually get the goodies in order and actually present a leader that Britain actually wants, that the people wants, and that people want somebody that's actually going to take a stance on rising inflation, on the wars, rumors of wars, and dealing with Russia, and of course just Britain's overall position in the world. Because you must understand, Britain, everything that happens in Britain has a knock-on effect with basically all of us around the world. Yeah. I think mainly in Africa, especially since they are a huge trading partner. Yeah. I just want to touch on 2019. I mean, UK exports to Africa alone were totaled at just over £18.5 billion, and vice versa, UK imports from Africa totaled around £16.7 billion. So, we're looking at a huge economic powerhouse, and rumors of wars, and Putin blatantly saying, look, Britain, if you are not going to come to the party and say, look, do you support, they are going to gun him. And I think the Conservative Party have gunned him and have used him as a scapegoat. But I think it's a more internal thing within the Conservative Party, and I think this is a perfect opportunity for Labour to actually rise to the occasion and actually present a candidate that is best suited.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to have to leave it there, Chat Williams. Really, really do appreciate it. Multimedia journalist at the IOL Africa Desk. Really do appreciate it. Let's take a couple of your calls on the other side of this on 011 714 2006.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAfm, let's talk. This week today, Fridays, 6 to 7 p.m.
And taking some of your calls this evening, we've got Mfundo out in the Eastern Cape. Mfundo, good evening.
Good evening, man. Good evening to you and your listeners, of course, from the country of load shedding. Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead. What's on your mind? We don't have much time, sir.
No, there are two issues that I would like to address. One has to do with the manner in which Pravin Gordhan is being treated by the media in particular.
Okay.
I see one of the weaknesses that we have as a country is that we must move towards the independent media. Because during the Zuma years, the media was very brutal in terms of addressing issues, and we're very happy as citizens of this country to say, look, they never looked for excuses. But the manner in which issues are reported currently, they seem to be looking for excuses around the issue, in particular the issues that have to do with Pravin Gordhan. I mean, look currently, why is it that the media is not addressing the issue of ESCOM to say, for instance, to the minister, you have board of directors, out of 19, none of them has got the skills to run ESCOM, no background whatsoever of the energy sector. No one is addressing that.
Yeah, but can I just pause you there? Yes. I think you're making a valuable point here. Just one thing on board of directors quickly. You don't have to be an energy expert to sit on the board of an energy company. Boards have multiple functions. Some need audit experts, which ESCOM has. Some need strategy and turnaround experts, which some of the board members are. It's a good point to debate what the composite of that board should be like. And I think that's a valuable point.
I disagree with you. You can't have 19 of them yet. Remember, all people were appointed with a full understanding that we are having a crisis in the country. Now there is no way.
Would you have a board that is filled with energy experts? Is that what you're asking for?
No, you don't understand the contentious issue. The issue is one is that you have 19 of them, and not a single one of them has got the skills and the expertise of within the energy sector.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm making. They don't need to be...
I'm not running away from the issue.
Yeah, but that's exactly the point I'm making, that they don't need to be energy sector experts to be able to sit on the board.
No, I disagree with you. You can't run an energy sector with all of them. This is the point that I'm addressing. You see my point? You are confirming my point that I'm saying about the space
No,
of
not
the
not
media
quite.
in
No,
our
not quite. I
country.
actually agree with your point that the
We
media.
should-
No, I actually
Yeah,
agree with your point that the media is lenient on Praveen
but I'm
Gordhan
saying
and they
the
should be much
composition,
harder on
the
him.
composition.
But I'm gonna have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we do have to take a few other calls, but really do appreciate your call this evening. Aisha, you're up next.
We're confronted with in the country.
Sorry, Aisha.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Aisha.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Unfortunately, you and I only have 30 seconds. Go ahead. Aisha.
What I'm saying, yes.
Yes,
can
go
you
ahead.
Hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
The IPPs do not create sustainable jobs. They only use workers during the construction phase, and that is temporary work. Now, if we're talking about a just transition, what are they going to do with the rest of the workers?
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think we should dump our renewable energy ambitions?
No. We need to put on the IPP, but then they have to think about what they're going to do with the workers, where they're going to employ them somewhere else, because they're certainly not going to. We have these IPPs here in the Northern Cape. And they only use the people for the construction phase, and then they let them go.
Okay. Thank you so much for your call, Aisha. Really do appreciate it. And that brings us to the end of the show. Once again, thank you so much for your company and being in company. Give me a tweet throughout the week highlighting some of the biggest issues of the week so that you and I can collectively put together the agenda for the next show. My Twitter handle is @Oliver_speaking, and on Facebook, it is simply Oliver Dickson. It's been a pleasure being in your company. Be safe and have a fantastic weekend. Cheers.
Independent and impartial. This is SAfm News.
A warning over KZN unrest and more condolences.